Christian fundamentalists have always wanted to believe that their country was founded as a Christian nation and have used as many ambiguous quotes and dubious pieces of trivia in an attempt to support this erroneous assertion. Of course, they have no trouble using the quotes that refer to the Founding Fathers' belief in some sort of deity to reinforce they were Christians, but it never occurs to them that deists believe in gods too, and the multiple anti-Christian tirades given by the majority of the Founding Fathers does nothing to sway their delusion. Even when they explain why explicitly and reflect the view of a non-Christian nation in their political documents, apologians are adamant that somehow, despite all of this, both the Founding Fathers and their nation were Christian, because they want to do whatever they can to attribute what is generally perceived as positive forces to their personal religion. The reverse effect occurs when it comes to negative historical forces. In my video, The Horror of Capitalism, Part 1, I gave a brief assessment of the claims that Hitler based his atrocious racial and social control policy on some kind of Darwinian or evolutionary principle, or in general that Hitler supported or imposed such principles. He in fact did the opposite. However, with a few minutes to spare, I also discussed his religious beliefs in very vague detail, which understandably attracted criticism. When a person's only objective in a discussion is to make the opposition look like a negative force, they often just attribute it to Hitler. The main reason for this is obvious. The combined atrocity of the totalitarian Nazi Empire, the Holocaust and World War II has thoroughly dehumanized and even demonized Hitler in a way originally reserved for ancient and classical despots of more brutal times. But there's also the deeper reason that Hitler was such an enigma. People strive to understand exactly what he was, since the amount of evil we attribute to him fascinates us, which is evident by the bulk of major documentaries somehow revolving around him. However, one myth in circulation about Hitler is not shrouded by very much ambiguity or confusion: the myth that Hitler was an atheist. The only way that one could possibly pronounce this is if they were willing to believe it in advance before seeing any of the evidence and refusing to change their mind after the evidence is presented. This is of course the definition of apologetics. Although Hitler professed a positive belief in a personal God and the importance of faith in both God and Christianity, both publicly and in private discourse, and although no quotes that denounce the existence of God or Jesus ever existed, and although Hitler made plenty of not only anti-atheist tirades, but also positive actions of persecution against German atheists, Christian apologians continue to spread the erroneous meme of Hitler's atheism. Then in 1952, a collection of Hitler's monologues compiled by his secretary was published, with a subsequent English edition being released a year later. The transcriptions were deemed authentic by Nazi architect Albert Speer. Within these transcriptions, fundamentalists feel as if they have found the evidence they finally need that Hitler was not a Christian by extracting short snippets of quotations of the book where he appears to be bagging out Christianity with a particularly high level of venom. Many scholars, even ones whom this topic would be of interest, seem to casually take these received quotations at face value. Richard Dawkins, in his 2006 book The God Delusion, gives the quotations a full acknowledgement to contrast against his earlier pro-Christian orations. He also gave the most reasonable explanations that Hitler experienced a bitterness or disillusionment towards Christianity by the end of his life, or perhaps was simply lying on one of the occasions. At first I simply concurred on such a conclusion, thinking it interesting that such fiery rants against the doctrines of Christianity fall so well in line with the slightly more eloquent opinions of the Founding Fathers of the United States of America that I mentioned previously. But then I decided to look deeper into it and drew from Hitler's table talk 3 possible scenarios the dilemma presents us with. The first of these is the most popular, that all quotes from Hitler supportive of theism and Christianity were lies intended to initially win Christian support. Okay, first of all, I'm not entirely sure how this scenario is meant to in any way save face for Christianity. Whether he believed his own words or not, Hitler's demagoguery and promise to take revenge on the Christ-killing Jewish people succeeded in winning almost universal mainstream Christian support in Germany. So whether or not Hitler was an atheist is already overshadowed by the definite fact that Nazi Germany was Christian. It's also, in my humble opinion, that for an atheist pretending to be a Christian to gain power, Hitler certainly went out of his way to follow through with his actions like he did and dismantle all free-thinking organisations in Germany, replacing them with ecumenical organisations, and then executing atheists en masse. In short, Nazi Germany was the least atheist-friendly country of its time. I won't spend too much time either on the fact that Hitler was true to his word in not closing or interfering with any Christian churches during his reign as either Chancellor or Führer, only ever becoming involved with the churches in an attempt to assimilate them into a single evangelical united church. The churches of Christianity refused, since the different tenets of its sects were too divided and hostile towards each other, and no interference occurred since. Add to this that Hitler knew his way around the Bible, attended church regularly, was never excommunicated from the church, nor formally renounced his Catholicism, and even that he credits his transformation to anti-Semitism to previously existing Christian anti-Semite groups. And I, again, in my humble opinion, am starting to think that there is definitely insufficient evidence of Hitler's past ever being insincere about its religious intentions and, more importantly, religious actions. The second scenario presented was one that I thought was the most accurate, that somewhere between his extremely pro-Christian rhetoric of 1938 and his alleged anti-Christian rhetoric of 1941, Hitler had deconverted from Christianity for whatever reason. Again, how is this an argument for atheism inspiring Hitler's immorality? Since the establishment of concentration camps, the plan to conquer Europe, totalitarian state control, and revenge on the Jewish people all occurred before Hitler's alleged deconversion, then clearly the guy was immoral long before he was an atheist. That being said, Hitler wasn't an atheist during this period, or even during the same sitting of his anti-Christian rhetoric. He spoke vehemently against atheism in favour of a belief in God. Hitler's anti-Christianity within the book does not concur with an atheist stance either. He maintained admiration for Jesus and described him as a factual historical figure. His anti-Christianity here seemed to stem from his belief that St. Paul perverted the teachings of Jesus and turned the doctrine of Christianity into a proto-Bolshevism. Combine this with the fact that Hitler integrated his belief in God and Christianity into public speeches right up until 1945 and his death, and even I, who initially believed scenario 2, can admit that this probably wasn't the case and Hitler carried on being a Christian right up until his death. This brings us to the final of the three realistic scenarios, and the one apologians would be the most willing to ignore or deny. That due to the anti-Christianity of Table Talk being an isolated collection of anomalous quotes with no audio recording, and the only confirmation of authenticity coming from a Nazi who stated that even after 1942 Hitler remained publicly and privately pious, there are unaddressed problems regarding the anti-Christian rhetoric of Table Talk. This problem comes in the form of how it was edited. Hitler's secretary, Martin Bormann, a staunch anti-Catholic and probably anti-Christian, was the mastermind behind the idea of stenographing Table Talk's quotations. The scribes appointed by Bormann were put under strict regulation, with the dictations themselves being subject to edited by Bormann himself, who was not even present for at least most of the dictations. The scribes themselves affirm that Bormann made unauthorized and inaccurate changes. Atheism, although steadily increasing in the most progressive countries, forms a very modest fraction of the world population at present. This is as expected from such a state of affairs that when actively applied relies much on rational inquiry, which many people would rather not exert. It's also a testament to their collective passiveness, as atheism has never had an inquisition, holy war or conquest/mission to evangelize by the sword if necessary. Despite this, many dishonest religious leaders are willing to spread whatever lie they can to support their position, and what all Christians hold as the ultimate godly behaviour one day will be expressed as a warning against atheist morality the next. Policies, quotations, friends, clerics, pastors, lovers, motives, means and methods of Hitler all unanimously agree that he was in all certainty not an atheist and got away with most of what he did by appealing to Germany's unwarranted mistrust of atheists. Unless religious leaders of the present are determined to prevent us from learning from history, it's highly recommended they stop spreading this falsehood.